Star Trek III, The Search for Spock. Short stories. Story 5, As Old as Forever. Captain Kirk, distress call on the emergency band, Uhura said sharply. Put it on screen, Kirk said, swinging his command chair around. The image was streaked and blurred, then cleared up somewhat as Uhura worked on it. It's coming from Hippocrates 4, sir, Uhura reported. Rotsler, an Earth-type planet with a single colony. The words were scratchy and blurred, but gradually Uhura strengthened and clarified the distant signal. Help! Anyone! We're the only ones left! Help! Need help! Help! Anyone! It's a recorded transmission, sir, Uhura reported. The computer says the colony was established 14 years ago as a medical research center. Mr. Sulu, chart a course for Hippocrates 4. The chief helmsman gave a crisp response, and the USS Enterprise altered its star-spanning flight. No life forms inconsistent with previous indications, Mr. Spock reported. Some grazing animals to the southwest of the station, but only one energy reading at the colony itself. Very well, Kirk said, throwing a switch. Lieutenant Collins, prepare a landing party to investigate the emergency. Aye, sir, the security officer responded. Any indication of danger? Kirk smiled. Every new planet is dangerous, Lieutenant. Standard precautions. Will you be accompanying us, sir? Kirk caught Spock's look. No, Lieutenant, not this time. Kirk out. The lithe captain smiled at his first officer. You don't like me leaving the ship, do you, Mr. Spock? It does seem unnecessary at times, Captain, but I am learning more of human nature all the time. Meaning that one of the reasons the human race rose up into the stars is the very urge that makes you want to leave the bridge and beam down. To see. Spock shrugged. Mr. Spock, Kirk said with a smile as he stood, you have talked me into it. Captain, I had no intention. Come on, Spock. Go with me. Breathing some air that hasn't been recycled 100 times will do you good. Spock snapped off a control. Very well, Admiral Kirk, of course. Mr. Sulu, you have the con, Kirk said. The surface of Rotsler was mostly drab and frozen tundra with a band of habitable land at the equator. The medical station was a cluster of domes interlocked by connecting passages. A kind of blue moss grew in patches all over the dome cluster. There were no lights except that of Collins and his men as they emerged from the main dome. Oh, Captain Kirk, Collins said in surprise. He gestured around in the tundra. Mr. Chekhov would like this. Mr. Chekhov was raised in Leningora, an archaeological structure housing almost 1 million people, Kirk said. He hates snow. Well, we got a youngster here who loves it, Collins said, gesturing to his men to bring forth the child. She doesn't want to go. Kirk saw Dr. McCoy bend down as he talked to a child of about 7. She was pale and beautiful, staring with blue eyes at the red-coated security men. Then her eyes focused on Kirk, and he felt a jolt, as though someone had touched his brain with a mild electrical shock. Jim, this is Pandora, the medico said, smiling. She's the only survivor. The doctor came over to his commander and spoke to him and Spock quietly. Her parents and all the rest died 4 years ago. 4 years, Jim. She's been all alone here for 4 years. Luckily, they had some protein processing machines that didn't break down. What happened to her parents? Spock asked, his eyes thoughtfully focused on the pale child. I don't know. The bodies, well, they're in one room. She doesn't go in there, she says. I'll do an analysis, see if it is something contagious. He hesitated. Jim, I hate to say it, but we'd better keep everyone here a while. I'll bring down Dr. Chappell, and we'll work as fast as we can. Very well, Doctor, Kirk said. He pulled out his communicator and gave some orders. The little girl sat quietly in the prefabricated dome the Enterprise had beamed down. She was watching a children's television show about blue dragons invading Earth and being fought off by Thunder Man. Admiral Kirk entered the dome and looked at her, then walked over to Spock, who was intent on a portable mega tricorder. Spock! Captain? He indicated a screen, and Kirk raised his eyebrows. That indicates the metabolic rate of our survivor. At Kirk's continued questioning stare, the Vulcan explained. The most efficient I have ever seen. She quite literally gets every particle of nourishment from her food. Her mother would like that. Her mother may have caused it. The records show her mother to be Dr. Marie McDowell and her father Dr. Philippe Metchnikoff. Her mother won the Nobel and her father the Salk Award. Extremely well-known, Captain. Their specialty was biology. Is that why they came here to this? Kirk asked, gesturing around. Some kind of isolated experiments? Spock nodded. Pandora was born here. 4 years ago, something happened. An automatic signal was sent. He looked at the child. But why did she survive? Perhaps McCoy can get answers. Phenomenal, McCoy said eagerly. Jim, look at this. Her metabolic pathways are the most unusual I've seen. Her metabolic synthesis is Doctor. Her catalysm is Dr. McCoy. Bones! McCoy grinned apologetically, the tundra wind whipping his brown hair. I'm sorry, it's just that she's a wonder, Jim, a medical wonder. She can live on scraps of food, on moss, or even just water. Her cells rebuild themselves almost at once. She's fantastically healthy, and she'll live. I'll stake my reputation on it. She'll live almost forever. They all looked toward the dome where the girl was, and Kirk's scalp crawled. She stood in the hatch, just looking at them. Kirk took McCoy's arm and pulled him away. It was getting toward dark, and it was colder now, but the child, dressed in a simple thin jumpsuit, seemed unaffected. Bones, is she dangerous to the ship? McCoy looked astonished. Jim, she's a child. A perfectly normal child. Well, she has been alone here, and... Well, Jim, she's unusual, true, but... He shook his head. I don't see how. What have you found on the research being done here? The starship officer asked. It's truly marvelous, Jim. I'm having the notes and equipment boxed up. It will be a monument to all of them. Yes, but why did they die? McCoy sobered. I don't know yet. He looked around. How many new worlds have we been on, Jim? Not just us, but Starfleet. Thousands? Millions? And no two alike. It is nature's treasure chest out here. There hasn't been one place where humans didn't need some kind of help. Domes like this, antitoxins, phasers, harvesting machines, and 1,000 other aids. McCoy looked back at the girl, still staring at them solemnly. But what her parents discovered will give us an edge, Jim. Our bodies will become really efficient. We may become immune to disease, to wounds, to... There was an explosion in one of the domes. Shards of the moss-covered hemisphere flew in every direction and flames shot up. As Kirk whirled to order in the security people, he caught a glimpse of Pandora. She didn't seem surprised or startled. Or afraid. Everything's ruined, McCoy said. Everything. Some kind of electromagnetic impulse blanked the tapes, the notes, and equipment were destroyed. The medic's shoulders slumped. One of the greatest discoveries in the history of mankind, lost. Spock stood nearby, watching McCoy report to his captain, but he was also looking at Pandora quietly watch a television show of mile-high green ogres striding across a purple sea to threaten tiny, cute cartoon people. Well then, Doctor, let's go aboard and take Pandora back to Earth, Kirk said. She'll get the finest care and... No. They all looked at Pandora, who was still watching the screen. I don't want to go back. It's scary there. Pandora, smiled Kirk, going to her. What you're watching is just entertainment. It's not like that at all. They lie, then? No, it's not lying. It's just imagination. Didn't you have shows like this? No, and I'm staying. Pandora, you can't stay here. Not alone. Why not? I have. But that was... No, Captain Kirk. The child was firm, and Kirk smiled as he stood up. Lieutenant Collins, he said into his communicator, prepare to beam aboard. Mr. Spock, Doctor, Pandora. The child jumped up and was out the door with blinding speed. Even Spock was unable to grab her. Kirk and the others ran into the night, but she was out of sight. Spock's tricorder showed no life-form energy readings. An hour's search among the humps and gullies of the tundra turned up nothing. Kirk ordered everyone back to the ship. I'll stay here in the dome, he said. Maybe she'll come back. If only one person is here, she may not be afraid. Reluctantly, the others left. Kirk sat down on a portable chair and stretched his legs. It's been a long time since I was a child, he thought. And a long time since I had much to do with children. He thought of her out in the deepening cold of the night, bone-chilling cold. the cold of death. Huh? Kirk came awake with a start. Pandora stood there looking at him. Oh, hello, child. Pandora. Do you want to go now? No. Pandora, you... He reached out to touch her, and there was a spark between his fingers and her cheek. Kirk was slammed back, falling backwards in his chair. I told you I didn't want to go, she said. I just came to tell you to leave. But it's lonely here, Kirk said, getting up slowly. It's always been lonely here, and since all of you have come, it's crowded. Kirk thought of a few people on the surface of an Earth-sized planet. No, it's just that you're unused to... It was like a scream in his mind. All she did was reach out to him, to touch him. Like fire, the feeling streaked to his brain, and he fell backwards into unconsciousness. Kirk awoke in an ice cave. It glittered dully in the light from several spots along the rock, peeking through the ice. Here moss grew, and the shallow yellow light came from hand-sized spots. No, he realized, from hand-shaped spots. Child's hands. A child had touched the moss and it glowed. He was cold, bone cold. Even the built-in heat controls in his landing suit had been overloaded. His nose, hands, and feet felt numb. The ice was all around in great clumps and crystals, and he was alone. Kirk got to his feet, his teeth chattering. Then he heard movement, turned to see Pandora come gracefully around a turn in the cave's icy wall. She looked pale and pretty, dressed in a thin blue jumpsuit with embroidered pink and red flowers. Pandora, what happened? Oh, good, Captain, you're awake. How did I get here? I brought you here, she shrugged. She handed him a packet of concentrated food. I found this in the dome. It's too rich for me, but maybe you... Pandora, you're a child. You couldn't have lugged me in here. Now who else is here? No one. She looked at him and put down the packet on a hump of ice. Didn't Dr. McCoy tell you about me? Yes, but I'm really very strong when I must be, you know. I just think about it and I get very, very strong. I learned it myself, she said proudly. Mommy and Daddy didn't know I could. Of course, I was only 3 then. They were trying to make me do something. She shrugged and sat down primly on another hump of ice. They were always trying to make me do things I didn't want to do. Pandora, they were your parents. They were trying to do what was good for you. She shrugged and smoothed the legs of her jumpsuit. Maybe. I don't know. I think I was more like an experiment to them. Maybe they weren't even my real parents. Kirk sighed and squatted down near her. She watched him a little warily. Lots of children think, well, they sometimes think their parents aren't their real parents because they don't get along with them at times, but I don't want to talk about that, Captain Kirk. I want you to tell me a story. Darling, I'll tell you all kinds of stories, but first we'll go up to the ship, and it was then Kirk discovered he had neither phaser nor communicator. Where are my things, Pandora? I want them returned. No, I hid them. They can't find you here. I found out about Mr. Spock's tricorder and the sensors on the ship. That's why we're here. They can't read us here, and you can't get out. I iced up the entrance. Kirk looked at her for a moment. You want to kill me? No, I want you to tell me stories. But I'll die here. I'll freeze. So will you. Pandora laughed gaily, smiling for the first time. Oh, you're funny. I can't freeze, not ever. I can use the ice to get energy. I'm really very good at it, I found out. Vegetable matter is easier, but I can get energy from just about anything. She smiled and motioned for him to sit on a hump of ice. Really, Captain, you're very funny. I like to laugh. It's so strange laughing when you think of it. Pandora, dear, I'm the captain of a starship. They need me. I can't stay here telling you stories, and Captain, I don't care. You came here, and now I'm going to have someone to play with. I thought about Mr. Spock, but he's spooky, and Dr. McCoy, well, he wanted to take my blood just like the others. The others? Mommy and Daddy and the others. They're always taking my blood and reading me with things and all that. I finally told them to stop, and when they wouldn't, I made them. A chill went over Kirk. It had nothing to do with the surrounding ice. You made them stop? She nodded. Uh-huh. I don't want to talk about it. I was only 3 or 4, you know. But they just wouldn't leave me alone. Now, tell me a story about how the Iceman flew to the sun. That's a good one. I don't know that one, Pandora. Kirk started to kneel next to her to tell her of the importance of getting back, but the child shrank back and put her chubby little hand on his face. Intense whiteness, pain, spots, blackness. A faint red haze seemed to be over everything. He was falling in slow motion, crashing back into the ice, breaking it, falling, sliding. Pain, red, black. "You've got to stop doing that," Kirk said with a moan. "I mean you no harm." "You scared me," she pouted. "You shouldn't scare me. I don't like that. The Cheebers scared me, and I made them go away, too." "Cheebers?" Kirk sat up groggily, testing his body for bruises and wounds. "The grazers. They're very territorial," my father said. "I can't go walking without them running at me." "And you—" "I found one asleep, and I touched him, and he ran off and told the others, I guess, and they haven't been back." "Pandora, I really must insist. Come back to the ship. Everyone will be worried." "No, they won't. Not anymore. While you were resting, I went up and checked. There are all kinds of people there, but they went away." "Went away?" "Very pretty, really. They just sparkle and go away." "Pandora, how long have I been down here?" Jim Kirk was suddenly very aware of a deep hunger and a bone-weary weakness. "Oh, I don't know. 12 turnings, I guess. They've gone, though. I knew they would because my daddy said humans are very impatient." "Humans? You're human, Pandora." "No, I suppose so. Tell me about the elves. I like stories about elves and princesses." "Pandora, 12 turnings is more than 2 standard weeks. I can't—" "Yes, you can, Captain Kirk. Now stop complaining and tell me a story." Kirk rose to his full height and looked down on the child. "I've never threatened a child in my life, but I have responsibilities to my ship. You will take me out of here at once, and we will go back to the Enterprise, and this whole silly thing will be over." The little girl smiled up at him. "Oh, it's just like Mommy said some men get. It's really good, Captain. Really." She hugged herself with glee. "Go on. Tell me how you'll clap me in irons, or make me walk the plank. I love it when people do that." "Pandora!" Kirk roared, and shook his fists in frustration. There was a clink and tinkle of breaking ice somewhere off out of sight in the maze of frozen water. The child clapped her hands in glee. "Oh, marvelous! Oh, great! More! More!" Then Kirk made the mistake of grabbing her again. It was as if he had grabbed a meteor. Color and light streaked around him, sound roared in his ears, his muscles, tensed and hard, seemed about to pull his body apart. He soared in a volcano sensation, as though his nervous system had been wired to a carnival. Kirk thought he screamed, but he wasn't certain. Then it was over. He lay limply, sprawled on the chilly, rough surface of the ice cave. The girl bent over him. "Are you all right?" "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hurt you. Please, Captain, speak to me." Kirk stirred and started to sit up, then shrank back as she reached for him. "Oh, no, don't worry," she said. "But when you grab me, well, I just can't help it. Mommy said some people scream or jump, and I react." "You certainly do," Kirk said. Everything seemed to hurt, and he moved stiffly. "Let me help," she said, and put her hands on each side of his neck before he could react. It was as though honey flowed over his body. The pain, the fatigue, even the hunger just dissolved away. He heaved a great sigh of relief and sat up. "I feel marvelous," he said with a smile. "Never better. How do you do that?" "I'm not sure," she said solemnly. "It has something to do with activating and helping your natural immune system. I mean, when you walk, you don't really tell your feet to move individually, do you? You just walk. Same with this." "McCoy will be fascinated," Kirk said, standing up. "Now, let's just get out of here and everything will be—" "Captain, haven't you been listening? I don't want to go. Being with people is— Well, all of you move in clouds of bacteria and auras of electrochemical energy. It's very hard for me to cope with that. But, Captain, it's like someone is playing really loud music right next to you. Do you understand? You can't think, do anything. I just want to be left here. But you can entertain me. 1 or 2 people I can take. If I get too many around me, She looked sad, and suddenly she was crying. Kirk hesitated to put his arms around her, but he did. There was no reaction. For a long time, she just sobbed against him. Alone since she was 3, he thought. 4 years old on a hostile alien planet. And she lived, she coped, she survived. She talks like an adult, but she has a body and the development of a child. "Is that what happened to the research staff?" he asked, and she nodded against him, sniffing at her tears. After a moment, she pulled back and turned away. "I couldn't help it. I was just a baby. I barely remember. They were always after me, taking blood. I hate that. And testing. I got sick and I had a fever. I kind of remember that. I struck back. She looked up at Kirk. I couldn't help it, Captain. You know when they hit your knee and your foot goes up? It was like that. I sort of sent out, spores, I guess. I called them wizards then. Little wizards no one could see. She fell silent, her eyes staring into the past. Kirk stroked her shoulders, his heart going out to the child's pain. They made me that way, you know. My immune system is very good. My metabolism can provide the energy. I've read about it since. There are notes in the books. Pandora moved off a few feet and spoke thoughtfully. A baby cries, throws a tantrum, and that's what I did, Captain Kirk, only what I did killed them all. I didn't know they weren't like me, that they couldn't stand against my wizards. That's why I must never go to where people are, not ever. I couldn't trust myself not to... She started crying again and trotted to him to hold her. Enterprise, this is Kirk. Captain, Montgomery Scott said in surprise and delight. He thumbed a transmitter control on the captain's control chair. Where are you, sir? We've been... Later, Scotty. Beam in on these coordinates and bring the two of us aboard. Aye, sir. Scott gave orders to the transporter room and then signaled to Spock. Mr. Spock, forgive me for waking you up. I know you've only had an hour's sleep after 3 days awake, sir, but... What is it, Mr. Scott? Spock said evenly from his cabin. The captain, sir. He's alive. Good, Mr. Scott. I shall come to the bridge at once. Good? That's all you can say, Mr. Spock. Good. He's been missing for 2 weeks, Mr. Spock. I'm well aware of that, Mr. Scott. The very fact that I kept the Enterprise in orbit here while we broadened the search is proof of that. Aye, Mr. Spock, Scott said moodily. He broke the transmission, and to no one at all in the control room he said, Sometimes I dunna understand Vulcans at all. There was more than one silent nod around the room. McCoy looked up from his scope and grinned at Pandora. You're as healthy as a horse, he said. Healthier, she smiled back. McCoy turned to Captain Kirk. Now you, Jim. Kirk smiled. I'm as healthy as a horse, too. I'll be the judge of that, the doctor grumbled. Kirk shrugged, winked at Pandora, and subjected himself to McCoy's inspection. The medical officer ended by shaking his head. You're right. There's nothing wrong with you. Nothing wrong. And that alone is kind of scary. Even some of your old scar tissue has disappeared. Kirk put his arm around Pandora. I made her a deal, Bones. You don't take blood, you keep the probes and sensors to a minimum, and she decides what the minimum is. But Jim, she's... Not anymore, she isn't. She is no longer a specimen. She is a 7-year-old girl. A special 7-year-old, but just a 7-year-old girl. Jim, this is an opportunity. Bones. The notes were lost, the tapes blanked. We won't know what her parents and the others were doing unless... Bones, calm down. She'll cooperate. She just doesn't want to be a subject anymore, you understand? McCoy looked at Pandora's big dark eyes and sighed. A week at Memory Alpha, at Luna Lab, Johns Hopkins. Pandora shook her head firmly. You mean all I get is what I've got? Kirk nodded. One blood sample, one brief examination, and then I put my career on the line and lie. Lie? McCoy looked startled. Well, let's say I just don't tell of everything that happened on Rotsler. Pandora was the only survivor of a mysterious accident and illness. I was lost for 2 weeks and have little memory of it, and Pandora saved my life by keeping me awake. McCoy sighed. And my research? Based on what you put together from what scraps you could find, which is true, and Pandora can live a normal life. No, Jim, McCoy said softly, looking at the little girl. She will never live a normal life. But it will be a very long life. A very long life. Her cells don't age. They don't build up the toxins which destroy us all in the end. She could live forever. Pandora blinked. Her chin quivered just twice. You mean I would get to be as old as you are, Doctor? Kirk burst out laughing, and after a moment of indignation, so did McCoy. Yes, my dear, this old, maybe a wee bit older. Spock entered the medical facility and looked at the three laughing, for Pandora had joined in with her tinkling laugh. May I ask the reason for this hilarity? The Vulcan said. Top secret, Spock, McCoy said with a smile. Spock's eyebrows went up. You mean you're classifying Pandora's fascinating immune system as secret, Doctor? McCoy stopped laughing. It was the only logical conclusion, Dr. McCoy. A biological research team of the highest quality on a remote and hostile planet. They are mysteriously killed, and the 3-year-old child survives alone for 4 years. Spock looked directly at the girl. Fascinating, he said. I realize you must have hidden Captain Kirk away in such a way as to fool our sensors. There was no indication of excavations into bedrock, so therefore you had reduced his and your vital signs to a minimum. That only could be done by an astonishing control of your metabolic system. It was therefore only a matter of time before you revived the captain and he had an opportunity to talk to you. Kirk and McCoy stared at the Vulcan, but Pandora went to him and took his hand. Spock looked faintly surprised. Oh, you feel funny, she said and giggled. You feel kind of bubbly. McCoy's eyebrows went up. Bubbly? Come on, Mr. Vulcan, Pandora said. I bet you could tell me some marvelous stories. Spock did not say a word as the little girl led him away. McCoy looked at Kirk. Bubbly? Stories? Mr. Vulcan? Jim, what? Don't ask, Bones, Kirk said. And remember, no blood samples. In his cabin, Spock was speaking softly, and Pandora's large eyes were upon him intently. Once upon a time, there was a beautiful princess who lived in a castle on a planet far, far away. What was her name? The girl asked. Princess Pandora was her name, Spock replied. Oh, good, Pandora said. Go on, please. Princess Pandora lived in a castle that had 7 towers and... Mr. Sulu, warp 1 for Memory Alpha, the information planetoid. Aye, sir. The stars began to sail majestically past, then blur and streak as they went into hyperdrive. And the handsome prince tugged at the huge dilithium crystal until the magic sword came out with a roar.